to universities, but I don't get this opportunity very often. So thank you. I really do enjoy presenting and look forward to this. So I know you're all busy with homeschooling and the changes that have happened. I know at least I am homeschooling 7 kids, or at least trying to homeschool 7 kids. I know it's hard. So hats off to you guys as parents. It's been a big adjustment for us as parents for us to be able to do it. So I was talking to my sister-in-law, who's a special education teacher, and she was talking about some of the struggles that she's having as a special education teacher. And she said she has a mother who has a newborn baby at home and also has a 3-year-old, and then she has a 7-year-old, and her 7-year-old, her oldest, is the one that has severe disabilities. And she said she's doing all she can to support this family, but knows that the education of her student, which is the 7-year-old, is really tough with their family circumstance right now. So my heart goes out to each of you. I know you're all in different situations and it's difficult, especially being expected to homeschool your children. So especially the ones with special needs, is that's certainly a different challenge than the other ones. So anyway, after I was asked to present to you guys, I began looking and following United Angels on Facebook and Instagram. So I've gotten a little bit of a peek into some of the things that you guys have been doing, and I'm thoroughly impressed with all that Sylvia and the foundation is doing. I saw there's a webinar on Tuesday, I believe it was. I did homeschooling and summer routines. So I thought that was really neat, and I'm sure was helpful. It sounds like tomorrow you have a virtual team night or dance party, if I'm not mistaken, which I'm sure is pretty neat. And it sounds like coming up, you're having a financial planning and special needs trusts webinar as well. So those will be pretty neat. Those are all areas that I'm passionate about. Again, I used to teach special education, and particularly transitioning from school services to adult services. So those are all areas that I have an interest in. So it's really cool what the foundation does for you as parents, and the great work that's being done. So Sylvia, if you want to go to slide number 2. Oh, you have a different one than I added a few slides from yesterday. So one of the slides that I added, what does the future hold for your child with a disability? And I want you to think about that. And if you want to unmute your mic and speak up, I have a few slides that will talk about this. So the first question is, what does the future hold for your child with a disability? And again, I'm open to having your feedback or thoughts about what you feel like the future might hold for your child with a disability. And I can't see the comments, so if you're making comments in the chat board, I think we'll get to that at the end, Sylvia said.
So folks, feel free to unmute your mic and join the discussion here if you'd like.
Yeah, so my question is, what do you feel like the future holds for your child with a disability?
What we want it to hold, or what it does hold? For
Probably
me,
both. Realistic is good, but also what our hopes and dreams are, I think, is good as well.
for me, honestly, my goals for my children with disabilities are no different than for my other children. I want them to be able to live independently, to have a way to serve or give back in the community, whether it be through volunteering or a paid job, but have passion and something that they're good at, and where they can use their own gifts to make our community better.
What do you feel like is will the future will hold? Is that different than what you're hoping?
I feel like it's changing, but certainly what would hold them back is lack of education and training, as well as perception of others as to what they can really do.
Thank you.
If I can step in here.
Yeah.
For my son, I've talked to him a lot about what he wants, because in my idea, it's not just what I want, it's also what he wants. And, based on his experiences, he's actually very afraid that he'll ever be able to find and get a job, because he's afraid that people will reject him. He's afraid there isn't enough inclusion out there. And he's not really certain that he'll, be able to find something that he'll be good at. And I think his concerns, and those are all of my concerns too. My other concern is, would he be able to find a job that will pay enough money for him so he won't be spending the rest of his life in poverty, particularly after my husband and I are no longer alive? Love you. Love you. Love you too.
Good. Yeah. Thank you. Others or anyone else? All right. I know for me, honestly, people with disabilities have more access today to do better than any time that we've experienced in the history of the world, which is, I think, a very positive thing. There's no better time than now for people with disabilities in general. People with disabilities have more access to educational opportunities than ever before. I know for public education, there's early intervention services, inclusion in general education, post-high school transition services. I know here in Utah, there's opportunities in higher education or for vocational education. I know they're with Aggie's Elevated. I know UVU has an autism center and their Passages program. So I know educationally, people with disabilities are getting more opportunities than ever before. And there's still issues with that. I'm not saying that our educational system is perfect, because I was a teacher for 7 years, and I've also worked in higher education and been involved with the disability field for a while, particularly in the education part. And I know there's still a lot of struggles with what is inclusion, and is that truly happening? And that looks different in every school and every district, and certainly a wide variety of what inclusion means, and what transition programs look like. So I know there's certainly difficulties and issues with the educational system, but I also feel like there's more opportunities for your child with a disability today in terms of education than we've ever had, which is good. So I also know there's more services for people with disabilities than we've ever had. And I'll go over a few more of those services a little bit later today, but there are services available from birth, if the person and the family qualify, and what is now available. And so there's lots more services available to adults with disabilities than there ever has been. People with disabilities are earning more and working better jobs than ever. And there's still, one mother expressed a fear of rejection, or what will their child be able to do, and also looking for opportunities to use their talents. And that's certainly a valid fear, I think, for lots of people with disabilities and their parents. I think those are valid concerns, and certainly ones that I think are something that we're still trying to overcome in the disability field, is trying to get more and more people with disabilities accepted in society in general, but also in the workplace, that they can be contributing members to the workplace and be valuable employees. But in general, people with disabilities are earning more and working better jobs than we've ever experienced, which is good. So that holds well for the future of your child in terms of the history part of that. So in terms of employment and options for your child with disability, there's the traditional or typical jobs like entry-level employment that they might enjoy when they're teenagers or early adulthood. There's also more options to advance and earn opportunities for career level or long-term positions for workers with disabilities, which hasn't always been the case, and still is an issue. People with disabilities often will get a job, and oftentimes the person with a disability or the family are so thankful for that job that there's never there's not always a consideration of what else could the person do, or could they advance, or could they progress in that field or that opportunity. So that's still an issue that we're having in the disability field. I mean, I have students that I helped get jobs for when I was a teacher. My last year of teaching was 2010. That still have the same job that they had in 2010 for 10 years. And they're good jobs, and I'm not saying they're bad jobs, but I also feel like we need to always be considering what other opportunities might be available for the person as well. So also some other options for people with disability in terms of employment. There are options today to pursue self-employment for people with disabilities, or for people with disabilities to own their own business. And I could give examples later on if that comes up or if that's of interest. But those are options that people in Utah and throughout the country have done. So there have never been possibilities like there are today in terms of employment for people with disabilities. One other thing that I think is really good that's going on for people with disabilities right now is ability to earn money and the ability to save money. And it sounds like you guys may already be aware of this, or if you're not, you're probably going to learn more about this in your financial webinar that you're having coming up in May. But people with disabilities can earn and save money using the ABLE Act, the ABLE accounts, if you guys have heard of those. Those began in 2014, and they're tax-free savings accounts for individuals with disabilities. So it doesn't count towards the $2,000 cap that often are required to remain eligible for government services and supports. So a person with a disability can save money in addition to the $2,000 in a separate ABLE account and save money. We have a person that we serve who has worked and put his money in his ABLE account and was able to buy his own car a couple of years ago. And so he was able to put about $5,500 down, which is awesome, because people with disabilities wouldn't be able to have done that in the past. That's always been something that people with disabilities wouldn't be able to save more than the $2,000 limit. And so there are things out there that are just great for people with disabilities today that we've never been able to have. So any questions or comments about that part in terms of the future? What are your hopes for their future? What do you hope? We talked, well, I think one parent shared what their hopes are, but what are some of your other hopes for their future? After talking about some of that stuff, I think it's important to talk about what you hope or what you foresee and what you want. Again, feel free to unmute your mic and share and talk. It sounds like you guys talk quite a bit as parents and know each other pretty well, from what I understand. So you guys maybe already know, but I don't always know what your hopes are for their future.
I think just like any other parent, I just hope that he can find that like a valuable employment, something that makes him feel like he's worthwhile. And for me, I would much rather not have a piece rate type of employment, but one that he can actually earn an income.
Yeah. And that's primarily what we're going to talk about today is there is employment where you can earn piece rate and sub-minimum wage, but that is pretty much gone at this point in terms of piece rate due to some of the federal rules. So there is a little bit of that, but that's going away. So most of what we'll focus on today is earning a typical wage for individuals, individual placements, and then being paid competitive wages. So that's primarily what we'll focus on today. But other comments about hopes for your child's future? Do you have fears or concerns about your child in the future? And again, it sounds like some of you guys range in ages in terms of some of you guys have younger, some of you guys it sounds like are a little bit closer to transitioning to adulthood. But What are some of your concerns or fears as your child grows and becomes an adult?
Well, I'm afraid of my daughter being vulnerable and taken advantage of.
Yeah, especially with daughters, right?
Right.
Particularly a concern for mothers with who have daughters. I have a daughter who's 18 and going off to college this next year, and it worries me. She's a really good kid, never had any problems, but obviously going out on her own is going to be a different thing. So I think that's a natural fear when you have daughters. Others.
I'm afraid that I won't be able to take care of her. And I don't want her to be under someone else's care because of the possibility that she could be taken advantage of.
So worried about you won't be able to take care of her, mean physical needs? Because as you age, is that what you mean? Sorry.
Yes, I'm in my 50s and she's a teenager. And so as I get older, I might not be able to care for her.
Yeah, that's certainly, and that's really hard, especially as your child gets older and matures, and you worry about their safety and their care, and is someone else, you know, as a parent, I know no one else is going to do as good a job or be as concerned as I am, right? So it's hard to pass on that responsibility to someone else, and there's certainly lots and lots of fears that come with those possibilities in the future. Good, thanks for sharing. Others? All right, I wanted to read, I didn't put this slide in here so you guys can see it. But I wanted to read and go through this because I think this is important. And some of you guys may already be aware of this. And again, I can't see all of you guys. Maybe I can change my screen that I can. But how many of you guys have read the book or are aware of The Dignity of Risk? You guys read that before? It talks about the importance of allowing people with disabilities to be able to take risks and have opportunities to do things. And again, it talks about taking prudent risks, not blindly taking on challenges that aren't going to succeed. We don't want that. We want to take prudent risks, but we know that the world's not always safe. It's not always secure. It's not predictable. People aren't always kind in the world, and that's probably our biggest fear, right? As parents of children with disabilities, I think is the hard part. So, as you can see, Sylvia, on this slide, opportunity equals experience equals learning. Every student who wants the opportunity to learn or how to work in the community, I believe, should be given the opportunity to receive community-based employment training and experiences as part of their schooling. And that should be with someone them, someone teaching them and guiding them, especially at the beginning. If they are able to show independence as time goes on, that's a discussion that hopefully the school and parents and the IEP team will make together. But that is something that I think every student should have the opportunity to be able to experience. Every student wants to learn and can have a typical job given the right training, support, and time to learn. And again, I'm open to discussions or comments if you guys have along the way. I can't see the chat, so I apologize. We hope to be able to, if you do have questions that you want to ask at the end, we will be getting to those. But in terms of during the presentation, you're welcome to make comments as well if you need to. So, but I'm a big believer that every student has the ability to learn, and that it's the school's job and the teacher's job to give them the best training and the best support that they need. That's one thing that I really struggled with when I was a teacher. I was really good at helping the students who had mild or moderate disabilities find employment and get opportunities. And I struggled my first few years of teaching to be able to help the students with severe disabilities to be able to get out and get training and get a work experience. That for me was a difficult part. And so that's part of why I went back for my master's degree, is because I wanted to answer the question of how do we get people with severe disabilities out here? How do they compete in the marketplace, in the job market, with people without disabilities? How will they get jobs, be able to compete with a typical peer? And so I learned over the years of experience and trial and error, and I got a very good education in my master's degree and learned how to help people with severe disabilities, be able to learn how to work in the community, and been able to have a lot of success in helping even those with the most significant disabilities work and get what they need. So Sylvia, if you want to go to the next slide. So this is a case study. This is one of the students that I worked with when I was a teacher. His name was Wesley. The last time I saw him, he was 24. He's older than that now. He's probably closer to 30 at this point. I haven't seen him for a while, but I saw him a couple of years after school. He had a moderate learning disability, and when he exited from special education at age 22, he had a part-time job working at a local store that we had helped him get through the school. And he had had that for about 8 months before leaving school services. And we had supported him through the school with some job coaches at the school. And then since exiting from school, and again, I haven't seen him since he was 24, he hadn't worked even one day because I live in Nebo School District, and there's some places that have limited transportation to no transportation. Where he lives, he doesn't have any transportation, and he was never able to get connected to services for adults with disabilities, which was one of the difficulties. So it was shown that Wesley could work at a paid job and maintain paid employment. But because he didn't have the services that he needed when he left school, his job ended. He didn't have transportation to get to work, nor did he have a job coach or support to go with him on the job. So that was one of the first students that I helped get a job when I was a teacher. I learned a lot about the importance of being able to make sure that not only do they have a job when they leave school, but they also have the supports in place to help them transition from what the school is providing to what they're going to be given as an adult. So hopefully that makes sense. You want to go to the next slide? So without the services, even if the school does a great job of getting people employed, which a lot of school districts in Utah County are really good about getting people the supports that they need and getting them connected to services for adults with disabilities. Without those supports, the likelihood that they're going to maintain employment is not high. So it's imperative that we have students and families be able to get these services in place as soon as possible. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these services here in a minute. So, next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about the services that are available to adults with disabilities here in our state. The main one in terms of for employment services is called vocational rehabilitation. How many of you guys have heard of vocational rehabilitation? A lot of you, some of you? Like,
I have. I've actually started working with them, right? You know, we're not quite qualified yet, but we've already had our first interview to try and get him a job.
cool, good, good. Sounds like some of you have, and then some of you were shaking your heads no. So vocational rehabilitation sometimes is referred to as VR or voc rehab. So just be prepared that people use different ways of saying what it is. Oftentimes people just say VR because they don't want to say vocational rehabilitation, or they'll say voc rehab. So just be aware that all three of those things are the same agency. That's part of the fun that I'm sure you've learned through the IEP and all the other acronyms that are in special education and that you've experienced already. So vocational rehabilitation is short-term employment services. So they're not intended to last long-term or to help the person long-term in their job. The services are to help with job development, job placement, and job coaching. So it's a lot of services that are upfront to help them obtain employment, and then a little bit of support to help them maintain employment, but not necessarily meant to be long-term. How many of you guys are familiar with what a job coach is? Very many? Okay. A job coach can do. Oh, go ahead. There's someone.
I think there are really great job coaches and some that aren't maybe as great.
There's a variety of job coaches, certainly. Job coaches are a person that can go on the job with your child and provide support on the job. Often in school districts, it's usually one of the paraeducators that can go on the job with them. Sometimes the teacher will. Just due to staffing, it's typically one of the staff and not the teacher that goes to help job coach. When you get to adult services, such as vocational rehabilitation, there are a lot of different job coaching companies that can provide that job coaching service, if that makes sense. So a job coach can go, a lot of you guys, one of your fears was about your child being vulnerable or being taken advantage of at the workplace. And those, hopefully a job coach can alleviate some of that fear. Your child can qualify to have a job coach with them on the job. Part of it's for safety, but most of it is for your child to learn how to do the job. So it's for skill development and training, not necessarily just for safety, although it does obviously help with that as well. So a job coach can be very helpful with your child. Want to go to the next slide? So this is a little bit of how to apply for VR services. And it sounds like some of you may have already started that process. Excuse me. You could contact your local VR office. Right now, there are 3 offices in Utah County. I would say maybe 2.5. There's one counselor that is half-time in northern Utah County. And then there's an office in Provo and an office in Spanish Fork. There is an office at the DWS in Lehigh as well. That counselor's in and out. So, and then there's also VR counselors that are assigned specifically to students with disabilities and to the schools. And Debbie Johansson knows a lot about those counselors, and I work with those counselors as well. And so students that are in school can work with vocational rehabilitation while they're in school. So make sure that you can apply while they're in school, and they can get VR services while they're in school. That's one thing that's very helpful. VR, you can start at age 14 to begin getting VR services even while your child is a student. So I would encourage you, if you have a child that's 14 or older, to begin applying for VR services. So again, this is the steps that you take. Contact your local VR office. And I can help you direct you to who your local VR office is, or who to contact if you want to contact me. Or you can probably contact your teacher, and they could probably find out through the school district if they don't know. But there are ways to find. You can also look it up online, find your local VR office. And then you'll attend an orientation. Usually it's about a 1-hour orientation that usually happens in the office. Right now, due to the pandemic, it's not happening in the office. So that's a little bit of a change. But typically you'd go into the office and have your orientation there at the office. And then during the orientation, you'd get your application to apply for vocational rehabilitation. What is different that you'll find from school services to adult services is vocational rehabilitation and other services for adults aren't just given to you. You have to apply and you have to qualify. Where school services, you might have 13 disability categories, but once you're in there, you basically can get similar services. Where in adult services, you've got to apply and prove that you have a disability and that you have a need for these services. So just be aware of how school systems work a little bit different than the adult system. And then after attending orientation, completing the application, then you'll contact your VR office to make an appointment and meet with your VR. You'll be assigned a VR counselor at that time. And the VR counselor will begin to work with your child to help them begin with employment services. And again, they can help during the school process. VR counselors can attend IAP meetings. They can help with services. I know I had a grant that I worked with Alpine School District for 3 years. And I worked specifically with transition age students who were 18 and 22-year-olds and helped them through the vocational rehabilitation process and getting jobs and maintaining jobs while the students were still in school. So just be aware that VR is eager and wanting to help while they're in school. It's a benefit that students get jobs before they leave school. Once they leave school, it can be harder. It's better to get a job earlier than wait till after they're 22 or after they've graduated. So, any questions about vocational rehabilitation? The next part, I believe, is going to be about DSPD. So before we switch over to the next services, are questions about vocational rehabilitation that any of you have?
John, I have a comment. Sometimes I think families are afraid that if they apply for voc rehab, say at 15 and 16, that they're going to run out and find them a job immediately. And I think they need to realize that it can take some time to choose a CRP and to have them get to know their child and to find an appropriate placement that they can get to, that they enjoy, and that they're happy to go to work. I think that they should have every opportunity to feel joy in their work as anyone else should feel. And I think that the CRPs that help actually find the job need to do their job and not just throw them into a convenient place that they have worked through, but that they actually get to know your child and what they would be good at and what they would enjoy. In other words, I think it's important to make them earn their money and find an appropriate job. That certainly is the case with you, John.
Yeah. So you want to go to the next slide? I think it talks about what a CRP is. We can talk a little bit about that. Maybe it's the next one. These are the eligibility. Yeah, that one. Thank you. Sorry to make you have to do that, but I appreciate it. Yeah, in terms of VR, they can do it as early as age 14, and they can work while they're in school. And vocational rehabilitation can provide services for a CRP. I think CRP might be the next one even. Sorry, I apologize. Try one more slide. Yes. A CRP is a community rehabilitation partner that works with VR to help with employment services. So your VR counselor really does a lot of the coordination of services. They don't necessarily provide the direct service. That makes sense. So you'll be given a VR counselor, and then the VR counselor often will refer you to what's called a CRP. And the CRP is the one that provides the job development, job placement, and job coaching services. That makes sense. Questions about that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does this service automatically happen when they are at ATEC?
Oftentimes, I can't speak because I don't work for Alpine School District, but we work a lot with ATEC specifically, and a lot of ATEC students. And I would say that ATEC teachers are very aware of vocational rehabilitation and are very aware of the options. So hopefully that is happening. I know we serve usually around 5 to 10 students at a time. So I know it's common. And again, the grant that we did for 3 years was with ATEC and ATEC West and ATEC East, I guess is what they call it, as well. So yes, hopefully that is happening and is possible. ATEC does have a VR counselor that is assigned specifically to it, and it's Anne Marie Smith is the VR counselor that's assigned to ATEC specifically.
John, I could add as an employee at ATEC that those ATEC students do still need to apply. It's not automatically done.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
John, we have a couple questions from the chat.
Yeah.
The first one, going back a little bit, can you tell everyone where they can find the book you mentioned, The Dignity of Risk? One parent looked it up online, found it on Amazon for $2,000.
I will look and I can send you some links about reasonable ways to access it. It is a very well respected book, and so some people do try to sell it for more than it should be, but there is ways to, I'll look it up and can find some. So,
Great,
yeah.
thank you. And then there's another question from the chat here. How can I get help finding employment for my daughter when she turns 16 this year? She will need help and could do some jobs fairly independently. We've applied and have been accepted into VR, but help with jobs doesn't start until age 22.
So you shouldn't need to feel like it's your responsibility to get your child a job. Hopefully the school is working on that and giving her experiences as part of ATEC. I know ATEC does take their students out for employment opportunities and then training out in the community. So hopefully your child's getting some opportunity through the school. In terms of paid employment, vocational rehabilitation can help with that while they're in school. And again, that's up to the VR counselor, to you as a parent, to the student has a say in that. And there's factors always that come into that, but you can get a paid job through VR while you're in school. So you shouldn't have to feel like it's your responsibility as a parent to take that on. That's not the expectation. At least it shouldn't be. So hopefully you don't feel that pressure. Maybe talking to your school, coordinating with your VR counselor that you've been assigned to, and working through that. Does that answer that question?
Heidi, feel free to unmute your mic if you wanted to elaborate. I saw you mention that your daughter's going into high school.
Yes, she's starting 10th grade this fall, and we've been on VR ever since she turned 14. She would really, really like to have a job, but so far they have not had anything to offer her at this age or when she's 16 even, except for maybe some summer short-term employment.
Yeah. So what can
So
happen?
she would like to be able to have, like any other high school student, be able to work a couple nights a week or on a Saturday once she turns 16. And there are a few jobs that she could maybe do independently, but she's going to need a lot of support.
Yeah, and as a parent, obviously to be able to get him a job and then support him on the job, I don't think is realistic. And that's how VR can help. We've had students that I've served through VR at age 16 to get employment. And so we helped one student, the mom wanted him to work a summer job. And so his first job was working at the Lehigh Library, helping with the summer reading program. And then the next summer when he was a junior, they wanted another job. And so VR paid us to get him another job. And this time it was at a movie theater. The mom wanted a different experience and the student wanted to learn some other skills. And so we got him a job at the movie theater. When the summer ended, they offered him a job to work on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturday evenings. So that's obviously the movie theater's busiest time. And VR paid us as a CRP to provide the services. And again, he was 17 at that time, so this was the next year. But so if you coordinate with your VR counselor, they should be able to do that. especially if your daughter's motivated and interested in working. So does that help, Heidi?
Thanks.
Yeah.
And a couple more questions from the chat here, John. Can you provide some examples of local CRPs?
Oh, there's lots of local CRPs. Debbie might be a better resource to give ones that she feels serve the area really well. Debbie, if you want to step in, you're probably the best one to. Debbie obviously works for ATEC and has a pretty good handle on who some of the CRPs are.
Well, I tried to make a list of them, but they come and they go, except for you, John. You've always been there. I think the voc rehab counselors can also give you a list to choose from. And I think it's a good idea to basically interview these CRPs. Ask them, how many jobs have you found for individuals similar to my child? What types of jobs have you found for children similar to my child? How much time will you spend finding a job for my child? How often will you go together looking for work? How will you get to know my child? I think that we feel like we are at the mercy of the voc rehab counselor in taking whoever they give us, and that's not true. We can choose which CRP that we can use. But the voc rehab counselor typically is not going to give you bad CRPs, because their interest is to successfully close a case with successful employment. So they're not interested in giving a bad one, but nevertheless, it is up to the parent to decide ultimately, and the child, which CRP they are using. I think it's worth mentioning to not just take the first one and feel like you are in their debt. They do get paid to do this. So I think it's important that they know that you expect certain outcome in working with your child, and not feel like you're at their mercy too much. Does that make sense?
Does that help?
Yes. And then, John, I think we have one more question here in the chat. If you can mention the VR counselor at ATEC again, is that Anne Marie?
Anne Marie Smith is her name. Yeah, she's a really good counselor. We worked with her for years. She's a good lady. She has done transition for quite a while, so she understands the school system and how it works. She can attend your child's IEPs and step in as needed. And again, it all depends on the individual and the family, what they want. Some individuals want services while they're in school and they want to get jobs while they're in school. Some individuals want to wait. You can use VR multiple times. So just be aware that this is not a one-time thing that you get VR once and then you get a job and you're in that job forever and you can never use VR again. We've had clients that we've helped get 4 or 5 jobs for various reasons. Sometimes they lose their job because of health concerns. Sometimes they lose their job because they're learning how to work still. Sometimes they lose their job because they move. We've had some families move, and then so they need a new job. So you can access vocational rehabilitation multiple times. So,
May I ask a question?
of course.
I'm wondering how getting a job and all this works with serving an LDS service mission, which my son would like to do.
Yeah. So it depends on obviously the bishop and the mission. Service missions are pretty flexible for the most part. At least from my experience, I've had clients and past students that have served LDS service missions. And I know the church has gotten even better over time with being flexible. Some of our clients have decided not to work while they're doing their mission. And some clients have chosen to continue serving and working. So it just depends on the individual. Some of it is related to, can they handle a work and service mission at the same time? There's a lot of factors that go into that, but I feel like the church has done a really good job in terms of being willing to allowing people with disabilities to have service missions and opportunities. So.
And if they did that, say, and quit their job and then did that, has it been a problem for people doing that to be able to get back into the workforce?
No, I don't think so. I think getting back in the workforce, I think as long as they're good workers and they have motivation, I think they should be fine. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that I see. Certain people with disabilities is as long as they're motivated, they'll be able to find employment. If they don't follow through or they don't show that they're going to be responsible or follow through at their jobs or be good employees, that's where it gets more difficult. But as long as they're motivated and they're good workers, they should be just fine getting back into the workforce after taking a break.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions quickly about VR before you move on to DSPD? I don't know how much time you guys want to spend, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Is there any other last questions about VR? If you want to go down to the DSPD section. So DSPD is another service for adults with disabilities in Utah. DSPD is the acronym, stands for the Division of Services for People with Disabilities. And DSPD is the long-term ongoing services. So like we talked about a minute ago, VR is all short-term services, and VR is specific to vocational or employment. DSPD is long-term and ongoing, and it does do one of the services that DSPD does do is employment, but DSPD also does many other services, which is different from VR. VR typically does employment and employment-related services, but it doesn't do behavioral, it doesn't do residential, it doesn't do day supports, things like that. So DSPD is the long-term services. What often happens, like in employment, once a client is done with VR services, they can move over to DSPD, and DSPD can continue to provide supports for the individual long-term once VR ends, if that makes sense. So once, like some of our clients that have qualified for DSPD services, they'll start employment with VR, they'll get a counselor, they'll get a CRP, they'll find employment and be able to learn the upfront skills with their job coach, and then VR services will end and DSPD will pick up, and we can continue to job coach the individual, just like the job coaching doesn't look any different. Just who's paying for it looks different. Hopefully you guys don't see any difference, at least. Hopefully it's the same company that can provide both. It's not always. Some companies only provide VR, some companies only provide DSPD, but many of the companies provide both. So you should be able to have the same job coach and have job coaching look the same for your child, whether it's VR or DSPD providing the supports. Does that part make sense in terms of how VR and DSPD kind of work together in terms of services? Julie, I can see your thing. Can you concurrently get VR and DSPD at the same time? I believe was the question. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, you can. You can apply for DSPD at any point. There's not necessarily an age requirement for DSPD. So you can get VR and DSPD at the same time. In terms of employment, you won't necessarily need them at the same time, typically. Sometimes we do have clients that we get paid to provide the transportation to and from work, and DSPD pays for that, and then VR pays for the job coaching part. And that gets a little confusing, and but just so you're aware, that's an example of how they can concurrently get both services at once. Maybe DSPD can help with transportation, and VR can help with job coaching. But you can get both at the same time, yes.
John, I wanted to, if it's all right, point out too that there are some perks for those just on the wait list for DSPD services. One being Support Work Independence program, which will offers some limited job supports while on the wait list. So it's worth getting on the wait list instead of saying, oh, we'll never get services, but there are some perks for just being on the wait list.
Yeah, so one of the good and bad things about DSPD is they have a wait list, if you're not aware, of about 4,500 people in Utah currently. And they are taking people off the wait list a lot. So that number is going down. The legislature has funded to get people off the wait list, so that number is going down. That's the good news. But you can still get employment services even if you're on the wait list. So if you transition from VR and your child is on the wait list for DSPD, they can still get, as Debbie said, the support work independence or the short-term SWI services. That makes sense.
How do you go about getting that?
SWI? Is that the question? SWI services?
Yes.
So SWI is a program within DSPD. So this slide is how you apply for DSPD. And then if you apply and you're found that you are eligible, but you're not an immediate, given immediate eligibility. So this is kind of confusing. Hopefully this makes sense, and ask questions if it doesn't. You can be found eligible for services, and 4,500 people in Utah have, but they don't have the funding to provide services to everybody who qualifies. And so you're put on a waiting list. So say you apply like is shown here, do the online application, or you can call and speak with an intake worker at DSPD. And then you have to provide them some information. And then they have 90 days to make a determination, DSPD does, on whether your child qualifies or not. Assuming your child qualifies and they're put on the waiting list, you are immediately eligible for the SWI program as long as your child is working. So if your child has a job and is working, they can have the support work independence program. Does that answer that question? Hopefully. Go down to the next slide if you can. So DSPD is a great service and can provide a lot of things for your child with disability. And it is worth getting on as early as possible to get DSPD services. The longer you wait, the longer you're on the wait list. So if you sign up now, the more likely that your child will get off the wait list at some point. Your child can get off the wait list for a variety of reasons, and that can get complicated. Basically, they have to determine services based on need. And an individual who maybe both parents pass away in a sudden accident or something, obviously that individual that's on the wait list and both parents pass away in a freak accident or something, for example, obviously will be taken off the wait list at that point and receive DSPD services because they don't have anyone else to care for them all of a sudden. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how DSPD determines who stays on the wait list and who gets off the wait list. You might stay on the wait list based on need. And if your child has people at home who can care for them, that changes things. Like we had one client who the father was an international pilot and gone about 16 to 18 days of the month on international flights. And the mom was a stay-at-home mom. And at that time, she was only getting the SWI services from us because she was working, but she didn't get any other services such as behavioral or day program or support living that DSP can offer because she was on the wait list. While we were serving her, her mom ended up getting an infection and it got into her bloodstream and she passed away suddenly. And because of the dad's work and being out of town so much, she got off the wait list and into services within a couple of weeks of that happening. So that's another example of an individual that we serve that's been able to go from waiting lists to immediately into services based on family circumstances. So it's not always the person with the disability that has to change, because obviously the disability often doesn't change. It's usually they're looking at, has the individual's behaviors increased? Has their health decreased? Has the caregiver's health or circumstances changed? Has it become a single parent situation? You know, is there abuse in the home? I mean, they look at a lot of factors to determine who gets off the waiting lists. Anyway, enough about the waiting list. Hopefully that helps. But these are the information that you'll need to apply for DSPD services. And again, the sooner you do it, the better. There's no reason to wait to apply for DSPD services. So I would suggest doing it as early as possible. Then if you want to go to the last slide, just to review. Often we all learn by falling down, right? That's how we learn how to walk. That's how we learn how to ride our bikes, is by falling. It's okay if our child, whether they have a disability or not, that they fall down sometimes. And again, it's taking prudent risks. It's being smart. It's not just throwing your child out there without supports or without services or feeling comfortable with that. But it's also understanding that they are going to become adults and they are going to have want more independence over time, just like any child does. I mean, my 18-year-old wants a lot of it, independence compared to my 3-year-old right now. And so we have a wide variety with 7 kids in between that. And so we see a wide variety of independence. And as your child gets older, obviously they're going to want more independence and more of a say in their life. And I think it's good now to see what's reasonable. Obviously, as parents, you know what's best and know what's reasonable for your child, what risks to take and what aren't safe risks. But I'd encourage you to always consider allowing your child to take prudent and safe risks. Try to get the post-school services like VR and DSPD in place as soon as possible. They can help your child, and there's no reason that they can't begin services now if you qualify as soon as possible. And then the last thing is that they have a job when they leave school. Hopefully the school is working towards that. The VR counselor, DSPD, that all that can happen. So thank you. I will answer any questions that you guys have. I'm okay to take whatever time you need, but it's up to you guys. So hopefully this has been helpful. Not too much information. That's always a hard part. Whenever I was a teacher and I was in IEP meetings and I would see my parents in person once a year, I always felt like I had to give them so much information. And sometimes I felt like I overdid it sometimes and overwhelmed them rather than helped them. So hopefully this has been helpful. Is there anything in the chat that you see? I still can't see the chat, so I'm not sure. Yeah, you can either use the chat or unmute yourself.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
Somebody mentioned Source America in the chat, a federal program that creates jobs for people with disabilities. I haven't heard of it. Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, they're a nationwide CRP, and they can help people with disabilities get jobs. Typically, I would say they focus on people with mild disabilities. For the most part, would probably be the best way that I would describe it. Maybe Debbie has a different way of looking at it, but that's how I feel. I feel typically they do people with more mild disabilities rather than moderate to severe.
I agree.
Other questions?
And folks, just in case you are not familiar with who Debbie Johansson is, she mentioned that she works at ATEC, but Debbie's also United Angel Foundation's own in-house transition specialist. And I put in the chat box her email address. So if you haven't had a chance to schedule your free one-on-one consultation with Debbie, she can do these remote for you right now. And this is a really great way to have some dedicated one-on-one time. So I put Debbie's email in there. Please feel free to reach out to her.
Yeah, I met Debbie years ago when I was working at the University of Utah, and we've known each other for quite a number of years. So she's a wonderful resource. We work with her, obviously, with ATEC, and then obviously she's the one that suggested that I do this. And so Debbie is a great resource in terms of knowing what services are available and what your child might need, and taking it through the transition process, the school process. So.
Yeah, and Debbie, you'll be presenting on a webinar on May 21st at 2 o'clock, an overview, a big general overview of transitions. Is that right? Okay, awesome. Any other questions for John, you guys? This is a really great opportunity to get those, detailed questions answered, and feel free to unmute your mic or type them into the chat box if you'd like.
I have a question,
Yeah.
which may be a little bit more specific, but how are kind of jobs or disabilities put in? Because I have a son on the autism spectrum who, is very intelligent and very good at doing things, but is very limited verbally. How does that impact, finding a job, working with a job, things like this?
So you're talking the communication part, is that the concern?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And what can VR do to help with that communication problem?
Sure. Yeah, so VR can help, and just like the school system does too. VR does have some resources that can help with communication. And I would encourage you to talk with the VR counselor specifically about that concern. And hopefully they can help direct you to that. There is a called a UCAT.
Yeah, it's fine. Good work, Kenan.
Sorry, go ahead.
Love you. No, sorry, please go ahead. Sorry, my son just walked in.
Okay. So I think it all depends, but in terms of communication, I mean, there's lots of jobs that isn't necessarily that's a big part of the job. So that's all something that hopefully a VR counselor and a CRP, or if it's through DSPD, can help with and recognize. These are things that are maybe limitations that we want to not be a big part of the job, and these are some of the strengths that we want to make sure that are a big part of the job. And hopefully a CRP will take their time to understand what your individual child's needs are, and what their strengths are, because we obviously don't want to put people with disabilities in jobs that they're not going to be successful at. I don't feel like that does anybody any good. I think the best thing that we can do for people with disabilities is find them good employment that really matches what their strengths are and minimizes what they're maybe related to their disability, or if they have. I know for me, I'm not good at math, and my wife does all of our business finances, and we have an administrative assistant that does all of our billing. And so I don't do any math for our business. And so I stay with clients and services, and that's what I'm good at, is working with people with disabilities. And so I think it's just finding a job that matches individuals' strengths and hopefully minimizes things that they don't do as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there's anything else in the chat.
No other questions in the chat. Folks, are there any last questions here? Or otherwise, we're going to let John go and give you one more opportunity to reach out and ask any of your detailed questions. Oh, John, I have a question. Will you send me an email with the resource that we asked about, the book? Sorry, let me scroll back up here. The Dignity of Risk. And then I will send that out to you. Any of the follow-up stuff I can post. I can send out to the email list for everyone that RSVP'd, and then I'll also post in our members Facebook group as well.
I have links to the VR application. I have links to DSPD, and I have links to the ABLE accounts that you guys can read up on. Do you want me to send those links as well? Would that be helpful?
Yes, please. Yeah, that would be great. And then John, can we also share your email address with everyone in case they want to follow up with you individually later on?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll send you all those links and then you can send them out from there. But I have quite a few links. Again, I had hoped to present from my computer, which I could have shown you what they all look like. I apologize that the privacy setting on my phone or on my computer that's not allowing me to share my screen, but couldn't get it figured out before the presentation, so I apologize.
Okay, I'm checking the chat one more time here. I think that's it. When there's no other questions, I want to thank everybody for joining, and we want to thank you, John, for taking the time to present this really helpful information to us. And Debbie, thank you so much for being here as well, and joining and being able to also offer some great information.
All right, thank you. You guys do some awesome work, helping a lot of parents. So appreciate what you guys do at the United Angels Foundation. You guys are awesome.
All right, thanks, John. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
See ya.